Welcome to the level 4 spell tier list for Baldur's Gate 3. As with all my previous and upcoming tier lists, these are my own personal opinion, my subjective opinion. If you don't agree with me, let me know why, but please explain why. Don't just tell me I'm wrong, because that's just going to get ignored. Before I start putting the spells into tiers, I just want to quickly go over how I rate the spells. Firstly, what other spells are available to that class? Kind of sadly and interestingly, for example, only 4 of these 20 spells are on the cleric tier list. They do get their domain spells, so they get a few more than just 4, but whereas wizards get 14 spells out of the 20 here. Secondly, does it require concentration? If it does, it's going to be further down the list. Thirdly, is it useful throughout the game? We get the level 4 spells at level 7 for the full casters, and in my own personal playthroughs, I am usually in Rosemorn Monastery at this point, so kind of the end of Act 1. Essentially, I will get these spells just before or at the beginning of Act 2 at the very latest. And am I still using these spells when it comes to Act 3, when I'm level 12 and towards the end of the game I'm fighting bosses? Which of these are actually still going to be useful? Can the spell be upcast? If yes, that's better. Can it be used in interesting ways? If yes, it goes up higher. If it's a spell that does damage, what type of damage does it do, with lightning and cold being higher, also radiant higher? And necrotic and poison generally going further down. In Act 2 and 3, lots of enemies are either resistant or outright immune to poison and necrotic damage. And I do tend to try and avoid thinking about specific subclasses and items. If I think a particular subclass or item is really worth mentioning, then I will. The first spell is Banishment, going alphabetically, which is available to clerics, sorcerers, warlocks, wizards, and bards via the magical secrets. During this video, I will not be mentioning paladins, rangers, eldritch knights, or arcane tricksters because they cannot learn level 4 spells or higher, at least not when the level cap is 12. So you pick an enemy, you can upcast it to pick more than one enemy.
Assaulting someone.
Assuming they failed their save. They are now banished for 2 turns. Not very long. It does require concentration. Now, what's the point in this spell? It's actually in this area. This is my favorite testing area because it doesn't really give away any spoilers, and there are no annoying spellcasters who will counterspell my spells. Anyway, this isn't the best area for this because these are all pretty weak enemies as things go. This is much more useful against more difficult enemies, and one interesting thing to note, this is one of the few spells that actually targets a charisma saving throw. So enemies have to make a charisma save, and not many enemies have a particularly high charisma, which is definitely a bonus. While they're on that plane of existence, you cannot target them, nothing you do will affect them, so you essentially take them out the battle for 2 turns. Now, what I don't like about the spell is what I've just mentioned, is the fact that it's kind of only 2 turns. There are other concentration spells in this spell level, quite a few of them, that are crowd control spells and last for longer. For me, it just about scrapes into A. The reason I like it is, assuming you use it on a correct target, like a stronger enemy, then you've just made the battle so much easier for yourself. What I don't like, as I've already mentioned, is it only lasts 2 turns, and that's just not long enough. Also, it is concentration, but we can't upcast it. So if you want to use a level 5 or 6 spell slot, you could potentially get rid of more than just one enemy, but you start to be able to get rid of more enemies at once. Next up is Blight. This is available to druids, sorcerers, warlocks, wizards, and bards via the magical secrets. You target a single enemy, they make a constitution saving throw. If they fail, they take 8d8 necrotic damage. If they pass, they'll take half that damage. So let's just see that. Right, it can target any individual enemy. The banished enemy still can't be targeted. Let's do the one with 90% chance, shall we? So yeah, that's kind of cool, I suppose. But. If I cast Fireball at level 4, so using a same level spell slot, that's 9d6 damage. It's not as high as 8d8, but I could have affected all of them here. I mean, you're not always going to want to send out a Fireball, well, maybe you are, I don't know. I usually do. But perhaps there's some reason you don't want an area of effect. And that's kind of cool, I suppose. At least it will always do damage. It's a saving throw. It's not an attack roll, but it's necrotic damage. Maybe I could get Scorching Ray. I don't have Scorching Ray prepared. Oh, it's kind of over here. This is level 3. At level 4, this would be 10d6 fire damage. I do have to have an attack roll with all of them, but I mean, attack rolls are very easy to improve, and they can crit, and we can add damage modifiers to that. Since we do get this at the beginning of Act 2, there are some plants in Act 2 that we can use this on, but a lot of them are resistant or immune to necrotic damage anyway. I'm just not impressed. I'm not really using this at higher levels either. For a level 4 spell slot, I'd much rather upcast one of the lower level spells to do the same amount or more damage if it's an AoE. And there just aren't that many plants in Act 3. Let me know if you know of any. I can't think of any, but I don't want to be like absolute in the words I'm using. But yeah, I mean, this is almost a critical miss. I mean, thankfully it does just enough damage, but I think there are much better alternatives than using Blight. I mean, Blight can be upcast, but it's only an extra 1d8 necrotic damage per spell level, and that means we're going to be using a level 5 or 6 spell slot, and there are some very, very, very good level 5 and 6 spell slots to use instead of Blight. Next up is Confusion, which is available to bards, druids, sorcerers, wizards, and knowledge domain clerics. So it is an area of effect spell, only affects enemies within the range, which is very useful indeed. It forces a wisdom saving throw. Does require concentration, and so then on the enemy's turns, well, they're confused. Several things might happen. They might do nothing. They might just walk around, or they might attack the nearest thing to them. So we'll see what happens on their turn. So acted normally, but then running back and attacking someone else, attacking each other, and so they kind of pick people at random. This fist here, or these two fists, did nothing. So with the use of a single spell and concentration, I took 2 attacks instead of 8, and they did some damage to each other. And so now I'm free to just go and attack them, do what I want. They do get to use their reactions normally though. And this lasts for 3 turns. We can upcast it to affect a larger area. I would say though that the area, I've only got level 5 spell slots left now. The area even at level 4 is probably large enough, but there's nothing wrong with having a larger area. This is a great crowd control spell. I'm hovering between A and S. I'm going to leave it in A just because of the concentration requirement. And there are some lovely concentration spells across all the spell levels, not just talking about level 4. Also, it's not guaranteed to prevent all the damage that's going to be incoming to you, but it's a great way to slow down the enemy turns, take out their actions, and I use a single action to do that. Conjure Minor Elemental is next, and that is available to wizards and druids. So it's kind of interesting, and we get 3 different options. Upcasting doesn't do anything, so we can either produce an Aether from the plane of fire. Let's just have a quick look at them all. None of these conjuration spells actually require concentration, which is great. I quite like this option the most. So this is an Aether, or Aether. I'm a class 20, that's very respectable, considering it's just a summon. 39 hit points, it's okay. They can be raised with aid, you can give them long stride, you can give them buffs. We've got this overheat bonus action, which is a small AoE, but would affect allies. We've got some weapon attacks. We've got Searing Smite, so for dealing fire damage, and his normal weapon attack. This is okay. The other options, what's it got? Here we are. Summoning methods, either ice or mud. We've got some Ice Breath for doing a little bit of damage. Chromatic Orb, probably more useful, a ranged attack. Creates an ice surface, or just dealing damage with their claws. These are a bit weaker, but obviously there are 2 of them, which means you might prevent 2 actions or attacks hurting your actual party members. And lastly, we have the Mud Methods. We have to be careful. Well, this doesn't matter too much. Mud Methods. Methods have an explosion when they die. So here we are, the Mud Methods. If you've fought the Wood Woads in the swamp in Act 1, you know exactly what these guys can do. Mud Breath, actually very useful, because you can restrain enemies, and restraining is actually it's good. So the movement speed goes down, attack rolls against them have advantage, and their dexterity saving throws have disadvantage, and interestingly, removes burning and they become resistant to fire damage. And these stay with you until long rest, there's no time limit to this. Anyway, I'm going to put this in B tier. I don't think any conjuration spell is probably ever, for me, ever going to be lower than B. Only real reason I'm going to leave it in B and not higher is there are better options. For druids, well, it's going to come up next, Conjure Woodland being. When we get it at level 7 and level 8, do you know what? I'd probably put it at A. But when we get to the higher levels, that are just better summons to be using. and Conjure Minor Elemental kind of falls to the wayside. But one good thing is we've got more level 4 spell slots than we do level 5 or 6. Next up is the other conjuration spell, Conjure Woodland Being. This is available to druids only and cannot be upcast for any additional benefits. So you might find yourself in a jungle at some point and you're by yourself, and what you want to do, you want to conjure a woodland being. And so you conjure a dryad who innately has nature's step, and you can see there's kind of a little ring around her which provides a buff for you and your allies, well, the dryad and her allies, so we can't be affected by difficult terrain, and quite importantly can't be restrained or paralyzed, and you get resistance to poison damage. That's a lovely buff. Now the most interesting and almost strongest thing we've got is we can have a fallen lover. Our summon can summon a summon. We can get a woodwode just like you find in the swamp. Also, we get strengthened shillelagh. Should she find herself in melee distance, she can do a decent amount of damage. She has spike growth and also entangle, both fairly decent spells, and considering that your druid doesn't have to actually cast them, it's even better. So let's get the dry. Oh no, it's all started anyway. Right, we've also we've got entangle and spike growth. Now I know this dinosaur is going to jump, so perhaps actually I want to try and entangle it. And then we're going to walk together. The woodwode itself has entangle also, and in that vine surface it gets regeneration, which is awesome. So there we are, the woodwode has created even more vines. This time perhaps dryad can cast spike growth. And our druid is just going to tag along. The dryad is immune to prone, pretty awesome. We're in melee. Give him a bonk on the head. That's a very respectable amount of damage. The only real downside is the dryad itself only has 22 hit points, which can go down quite quickly, and the armor class isn't particularly high, so you don't really want to be getting her into melee too often against at least stronger enemies. But she comes with a couple of good berries to heal herself. Anyway, let's go straight up to S tier. This is such an amazing conjuration spell, and when I compare it to Minor Elemental, I think it just beats it outright, because we actually get 2 things we can summon, and they're different to each other. Like, there's some variety, which is really, really good. Death Ward is our next spell, available to clerics and bards via the magical secrets. So you can protect a single creature from death just for one time in the long rest though. So the next time, damage would reduce it to 0 hit points. It remains conscious with a single hit point left. It's not concentration, which is awesome. So I'm going to show you something quite interesting about this spell. So what I want to do is use up my 2 bonus actions on my action. Okay, so then we'll... So they didn't die, they're now conscious, and very interestingly, we're going to have our action and 2 bonus actions again. If you'd set someone up with haste and an elixir of bloodlust, perhaps a thief, perhaps you've got something like the helmet of grit, which gives you an extra bonus action beneath 50% hit points, you could use all of those up and then try and get yourself killed on your turn, and then you get back up and use all of it again. Now also it's worth showing you, just going to cast this again. Let's say I use 4 magic missiles, 1, 2, 3, 4. It only prevents a single instance of damage. So if you're facing enemies with Death Ward, which does happen towards the end of their life, I suppose, you do want to use magic missile if you've got it. Upcasting doesn't do anything. I'm going to leave this at B tier. What you can do, which would put it straight up to S. I don't personally do this, but what you can do is get 2, 3 hirelings from Withers, get them to cast Death Ward on your party members, kick them out of your party and go and get your party members. Because it doesn't require concentration, this buff will last until long rest or until it's used. If you're doing it that way, definite S tier, because you're saving everyone from death at least once in the long rest. But for me, it's a level 4 spell slot. It's not the most expensive spell slot to use, but they're starting to get more valuable at this level, where we can be upcasting lower level spells, we can just be dealing out damage or stopping enemies from hurting us. I think that sometimes there are better uses, and for clerics, it's competing with Banishment in terms of spell slot used and spell prepared, and Guardian of Faith, which is, well, we'll get to it, but I quite like Guardian of Faith. Dimension Door. This is available to bards, sorcerers, warlocks, wizards, and trickery domain clerics. Upcasting does nothing, but what you get to do is you teleport yourself and up to 1, it says adjacent, but there is like a small range there, ally to a place you can see. The ally cannot be larger than medium. So I could take Shadowheart, you click on a target, and then pick somewhere far away. The range is quite good, but something I've noticed, well, I can't take Tavernaut with me. So because of the item he is wearing, Unwavering Bull, this is the feature name, so he can't be restrained, and very weirdly, I guess it's just the way the coding works, I can't take someone with me if they can't be restrained. Now bear in mind, this costs an action. I'd say this is more useful inside combat. One thing I know people who've played Dungeons & Dragons will be disappointed with is that we need to have line of sight to actually teleport away. But in D&D, we don't. It's just anywhere within range. So it can go a long way, which is cool. It does need to be an ally. So if I come to here, even if someone that's a neutral NPC won't come with me. So we can take Shadowheart away. Go have the time of our lives. Now it can be very useful in a combat, moving you to somewhere usually high, but it's a level 4 spell slot and an action. If you're not taking someone with you, it's just a worse version of Misty Step, because Misty Step is a level 2 spell slot and only requires a bonus action. There are lots of ways to be mobile in this game, jumping being one of the big ones, and I just don't find a great use in Dimension Door. Now it's not completely useless, I have used it myself, but the fact it takes an action in combat is just not very good, because most of the time you either want to be hurting or killing an enemy, or using something to control them if you can, to stop more attacks coming your way. Now Dimension Door can get you to safety, absolutely fine, but for a level 4 spell slot and an action, it's just not for me. Okay, we're going to go back to the jungle for Dominates Beast, which is available to druids, sorcerers, nature domain clerics, archfey warlocks, great old one warlocks, and bards via the magical secrets. This is a concentration spell that doesn't gain any benefit from upcasting, and you try and, well, dominate, I suppose, a beast. So here's a nice dinosaur. So now they're on my side. And because I got on prone, I lost concentration. We can try one more time against this beast. There we are. So on its turn, instead of attacking me, it will attack an enemy. As long as it doesn't take damage, then it will pretty much stay on my side. Or I don't lose concentration. That's actually very important as well. But bear in mind, it will turn to be my enemy once I've either lost concentration or the spell duration runs out. This is going between C and D tier for me. The concentration requirement is understandable but annoying. But the main problem is there just aren't that many beasts that we come across. I mean, yes, I've found this situation here where, in fact, in this area, all the enemies are beasts, so it's kind of good, it's great. But for the majority of the game, there just aren't that many. And the problem is, unless you know ahead of time where to go, you don't know when to prepare it. Now, Chihira here has picked a Circle of the Land where basically she's got it as effectively like a domain spell. So she's always got it, and in this case it's fine. But I wouldn't want to pick this on a Sorcerer or Warlock, or Bard really, because this will be permanently in your spells known, and you're not going to get much use out of it. On the classes that always have it prepared, it's probably better to have because you're not wasting a spell known or spell prepared. So it's a bit higher, so when you need it, you've got it. But the opportunity cost of choosing Dominate Beast for most of the classes is a bit too high. If there were more beasts in the game, I'd definitely put it higher. To me, there just aren't enough. It's such a great effect, but we use it so rarely that I just don't ever feel the need to actually have it prepared. Evard Black Tentacles. What was that, Evards? I'm going to say Evards. This is available to wizards and great old one warlocks only. So you have an area. Now, just before this, Shadowheart got off a Glyph of Warding Sleep that actually sent all 5 of them to sleep. It was amazing. Upcasting doesn't do anything. It does require concentration. So you create an area, it creates a surface. Lovely tentacles coming out, hence the name of the spell. And on the enemy turns, they have to make a strength saving throw, and if they fail, these are restrained in place and take 3d6 bludgeoning damage. And basically this is both damaging and crowd control all in one. The damage isn't the most, but it's nice consistent damage. But one very useful thing is it does provide advantage. It will affect your allies, so I don't really want Will the Paladin here walking into the surface. So he's going to use his not so good bow, but it provides everyone with advantage, which is pretty cool. Shouldn't lose concentration this time. So taking damage, and once again we can just stand here shooting. No problem. They do have disadvantage on dexterity saving throws, something like a Sacred Flame or even Glyph of Warding is going to do very well because it's a dexterity saving throw. And I would imagine none of them pass their saving throw there. Fail, 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 fail. This is an easy A, but once again, it's another concentration spell, and again, it's on the wizard spell list. It's so hard to know which of these to use. They're all good for different things. This is good for multiple enemies that you want to just keep in place and deal some damage to. Confusion if you want to really mess up the action economy and get enemies to hurt each other. And Banishment if you've got a strong, or if you want to upcast some stronger enemies you just want to get rid of for a few turns. But this is a very, very useful spell. And I'm sure some people are going to give some good combinations we can use alongside Evard's Black Tentacles here. Fire Shield is next. Available to Wizards, Fiend Warlocks, and Bards via the Magical Secrets. So we have two variants, either Chill or Warm. They each do 2d8 damage of their respective damage type when the caster is hit. The Chill variant makes you take half fire damage if you receive any, and then the Warm variant makes you take half cold damage if you receive any. Let's put the Chill one up. Upcasting doesn't do anything, it's just I'm running out of spell slots. So if this guy hits me, it took 3 damage. That's just unfortunate, isn't it, right? 3 on 2d8. It doesn't require concentration, but only lasts 10 turns. Now, on an Abjuration Wizard with the Arcane Ward and maybe a Pact of the Blade Warlock, it would have to be Fiend Warlock, but Pact of the Blade could be up at A or S, but for all the other types of Wizards and Warlock, just don't think it's really worth casting. Ahead of combat, maybe, but you don't really want to be hit. The amount of damage it does just isn't enough to justify a level 4 spell slot, unless you're planning to get hit a lot and you're doing it on purpose. I don't want to use an action in combat just to set up retaliation damage. And it's not even a lot, like 2d8 for a level 4 spell slot. I know it could be multiple attacks, I just don't rate it that well. You could make enemies wet, which would increase the cold shield, the chill shield, and even upcasting it doesn't even do anything either. The only reason it's not lower for me is the fact it is in concentration, so you can kind of feel free to cast it if you know a combat's coming up, fine. But I just don't think most of the time, if you're positioning your wizard well, you won't find much use out of it. If it was a lower level spell slot or lower level spell, but yeah, sure. But at level 4, it's just a bit too expensive for me. Freedom of movement. This is for bards, clerics, and druids. A bit like Death Ward, it's a buff that lasts until long rest. Upcasting it doesn't do anything, and you can't lose this once you've cast it, unless you take a long rest. So a single target will, if they're stunned or come out of the stun, aren't slowed by difficult terrain, can't be magically paralyzed or restrained. Sounds awesome, kind of is. And a bit like with Death Ward, you can get a hireling, get them to cast Freedom of Movement on everyone you want, and then leave them in camp. Now, I've already cast it on Tavernot here. All right, we can see we've got the Freedom of Movement buff. Awesome stuff, but for me, a massive but. Let's put down some grease, which is difficult terrain. Not going to be slowed by it. Awesome. But this Freedom of Movement, this level 4 buff, which is supposed to stop you from being restrained and paralyzed, doesn't stop you from falling prone by slipping. Ice can make you fall over still. Immune to difficult terrain. Awesome. Now, I get that the spell doesn't say it makes you immune to slipping or falling prone, but my gosh, I think it really, really should. It's a bit like with Death Ward. If you're getting a hireling to cast this on your party every day, or if there's someone you don't take in your party, S tier, brilliant. Good stuff. If you're not doing that, I'm going to leave it at B. It's still a good buff to have, but the fact it doesn't stop you from falling prone, it's just like a kick in the teeth. We've got all of these awesome protections, but not against something so simple as just falling over. Grasping Vine, available to druids and nature domain clerics. This pretty much useless spell uses concentration, and you summon a Grasping Vine, which has a total of 6 hit points with an armor class of 10. What can this Grasping Vine do? It can potentially pull targets towards it. I don't know if it's going to survive. It's gone. Like, any AoE is going to get rid of it. I'll cast it again. So what can it do? Right. I guess anyone who's held has a 100% chance to be pulled. But there are just so many better things to do with the level 4 spell slot and concentration. It's just awful. If any of these gets a single attack off, it's going to kill it. There we are. We'll get Gale to finish off this fight. Whew. Greater Invisibility is next. Available to bards, sorcerers, archfey warlocks, wizards, and Circle of the Land druids if they pick the Underdark option. So this is a bit of a strange one. It's a concentration spell. Upcasting doesn't do anything, so it lasts 10 turns. So I can cast it on Tavernaut. So it does explain in the spell description. So the creature is invisible. Attacks against it have disadvantage, it attacks with advantage. Great, that's a nice buff for ourselves. However, invisibility breaks when you fail increasingly harder stealth checks on attacking, casting spells, or interacting with items. So let's say I've got Tavernaut here, and he's not seen. If I, let's say, attack Fist Kepso, stealth successful. And so we start off with difficulty class 15, and if I do a second action, okay, we're doing well. He goes up to 17, and let's attack again. Stealth successful, and each time I take an action, the difficulty class goes up by 1. So let's try that again. Stealth successful, and it was difficulty class 19, and I'm starting to get to the point where I might not be able to actually maintain invisibility. Now, the only reason this is doing okay, I'm currently at plus 10, and with the graceful cloth, which you can get from outside the Rosimon monastery, I've got advantage in all of these checks. If I didn't have some sort of bonus to stealth, I would have broken this almost immediately. That DC of 15 is actually relatively high for anyone who's not spec'd into stealth. So I'm finding this very difficult, because on the one hand, if you've got someone who's really good at stealth, and you can get bonuses of like almost up to like plus 20. When you've got expertise, a very high dexterity, you've got some items that give you stealth. It's basically A or S tier. It does require concentration, sadly. But if I cast this on someone who doesn't have a good stealth stat, you've just wasted your level 4 spell slot on action and concentration, because you're going to fail very, very quickly. But with a high stealth, it's almost abusable. So this one's very polarizing for myself. And as I've done with my other tier lists, I am trying to take an average, because I've only got one symbol here, one icon for greater invisibility. So I'm kind of unhappy with myself, but I don't really know where else to put it apart from in the middle, because you really have to have a build ready for it. These other spells, it doesn't particularly matter what build your character is. As long as they've got a good casting stat, you're going to do fine. But here, you have to have a character who is good at stealth. If they're not, it's completely pointless. So I'm going to leave it just in the middle. Next up is Guardian of Faith, which is available to clerics and bards via their magical secrets. Upcasting doesn't do anything. It does not require concentration. So you pick somewhere within range to plonk it down. And then, if anything attacks the Guardian, it will strike back. Or if anyone tries to hit one of your allies within this area, it also attacks them. So Will here is going to take an opportunity attack. Off it goes. Bam! 20 radiant damage. At the same time, it takes 20 radiant damage, or takes as much damage as was done. So it's not a bad idea to stick everyone inside. Yeah. So he attacks. And he gets to attack. And he can do it more than once per round. Now it's gone. Interestingly, I'll show you on the next round. Interestingly, you can actually shove it around. So we can cast it again. Now, it can be shoved around to move it, but otherwise it's stationary. The Thunder Wave would also make it move around. The way the attack works is the enemy makes a dexterity saving throw. Even though it looks like it's swinging a sword, actually it's just forcing a dexterity saving throw. And if they pass, they still take half damage, which is why you either do 20 or 10 damage. When you first get this, I actually think this is S tier. Very, very good, because it doesn't require concentration, and it's a cleric spell, and they've only got 4 spells at level 4. Guardian of Faith, Banishment, Death Ward, and Freedom of Movement. And of these options, it is very good, because on one turn you can cast Guardian of Faith, and next turn Banishment if you really want to. As we get to the higher levels and further into the game, the damage it does just doesn't quite keep up. So I'm going to leave it in A tier, just because of the longevity and the use out of it, but I still think it's a very good spell indeed. Ice Storm is next, available to druids, sorcerers, wizards, Tempest Domain clerics, and bards via their magical secrets. So we have an area of effect, and if we upcast it, we will deal an extra 1d8 bludgeoning damage. So it deals bludgeoning damage and 4d6 cold damage. And for 2 turns, the ice is created. This will affect allies. It is an evocation spell though. I'm going to get the Guardian of Faith no matter what I do. If I want to get all of the enemies inside, which I kind of do. So there's all the ice, and anything connected that can be frozen, which is blood I think, is frozen. Ignoring Cull the Weak. Yeah, we're doing some damage. And then on the enemy turn, they might fall over. If they're clever, they will jump out. Now I will say, if you just want to be dealing damage, at least on a sorcerer and wizard, Even just a level 3 fireball does more damage. You could upcast it and do even more. So the fact we've got some cold damage in Ice Storm is good. The 4d6 can be doubled. I'm going to leave it in B tier. Now I have created a large ice surface, but there are other ways of doing that. It can take a bit longer, but for 4th level spell slot, I'm not quite so sure it's really worth the casting. Now here it was, definitely was in this situation, because I had a lot of enemies in the area, and I knew that there's a quite a high chance they're going to try and walk out or jump out. But if you don't have a lot of enemies around, it's probably better just to cast one of the other crowd control spells we've got. But it's not bad whatsoever. We can increase the damage, which is good. And the fact it does create ice is good, but it will only last for 2 turns. Well, not even 2 turns really, was it? That was just 1, really. They were only in the ice for 1 turn. A bit disappointing. It does at least leave water behind. So if I really want to create more ice, I can do. Yeah, not the best, not the worst. Solid pick. Otiluke's Resilient Sphere is next, and this is only available to wizards. Now, I am about to show a boss fight in Act 3, so if you don't want to see that, please do look away now and just skip to Phantasmal Killer and just see where I've put it afterwards. I will spend some time back on the tier maker screen without showing the fight. So I am here fighting Saravok. And so the spell is a concentration spell. It doesn't gain any benefits from upcasting, and you can cast it on yourself or an enemy, and whoever it is cast upon, they are enclosed, their movement speed is reduced by half, and it says blocking all incoming and outgoing damage. In fact, it's blocking anything incoming and outgoing just whatsoever, pretty much. So I'm going to try and cast it on Saravok himself. There it is. So now, if I try and go up to Saravok, I just can't do anything to him. I can't hit him, which might seem bad, but actually he's quite dangerous. This lasts for 3 turns. It's not that bad. So I can go and focus on the other characters. I'm not saying this is necessarily the best thing to do in this particular fight. Just trying to point out you can cut off one enemy, and I would make it someone who's particularly difficult while you focus on the rest of the fight. And now on Saravok's turn, he can just walk around. That's it. And now I can prepare myself to fight Saravok alone, though he is fully buffed up now, annoyingly. Now, aside from putting an enemy into the sphere, you can put yourself into the sphere. If I start combat,
You were witnessed assaulting someone.
we'll find that Gale cannot be hurt here. The enemies can't target him. He also won't be able to target enemies. So he can walk around. Sure, they can get an opportunity attack, but nothing happens. I've actually just used up their reaction, which is pretty cool. But I can't cast anything from inside the sphere. I can drop concentration, not a problem, but I can't have the safety of the sphere and also be casting out of it. Now, since I put Banishment on up into A tier, I think it's only fair I put Otiluke's Resilient Sphere up here, because it essentially has the same effect as Banishment on an enemy, except it lasts 3 turns. The downside is it uses a dexterity saving throw to resist instead of charisma. But also you can protect an ally or yourself. What Gale can do is just like eat potions. Drink potions. It has a bit more utility than Banishment, but Banishment can be upcast. So there are positives and negatives between Banishment and Otiluke's Resilient Sphere. Phantasmal Killer. This is only available to wizards. It is a concentration spell. You can upcast it to deal an additional 1d10 psychic damage per level. You target a single enemy, they make a wisdom saving throw.
You were witnessed assaulting someone.
This guy goes last, but at the beginning of his turn, he'll take 4d10 psychic damage. Now it looks like Calm Emotions actually takes away Phantasmal Killer. Instead, I'll try it on the person who's definitely going next, and they are immune because of Calm Emotions. I'm gonna have to start this again. This time they're all surprised. Gonna try and put it on the person who goes next. There we are. So they took 26 psychic damage. And then at the beginning of the next turn, 29. And then because of Call of the Week, they died. So that's a pretty strong spell. I'm going to leave it in B tier. It's only really good against enemies who have a lot of health, difficult to kill, because it does require concentration. And once the enemy is dead or they've lost the effects, you can't recast it again. Now, over 1 turn, it does less damage than Blight, but over 2 turns, it will do more damage than Blight. And again, if you're lasting 3 turns, it's going to do a decent amount of damage. But while you're concentrating on this, You can't concentrate on any of these ones above, which could potentially be more useful, but it's decent enough, but the concentration requirement kind of stops it from going any higher. Polymorph is next, which is available to bards, druids, sorcerers, wizards, trickery domain clerics, and warlocks if they pick the Eldritch Invocation Sculptor of Flesh. It is a concentration spell. Upcasting it doesn't do anything, sadly, and you target a single creature, which can be an ally or an enemy, and if they fail a wisdom saving throw, they are turned into a sheep. The same thing goes for your allies. They are also turned into sheep if they are polymorphed. Unfortunately, if I deal 3 damage to the sheep, they revert back to the old form. So if you're going to use this, a bit like with Otiluke's Resilient Sphere, you want to use it on an enemy who's particularly difficult to beat. I'm not going to show the boss that I was fighting earlier, so no more spoilers, but in one of my playthroughs I did cast Polymorph on this boss and it lasts for 5 turns, so you can deal with everyone else in the fight and then come back to them if you can maintain concentration. Kind of interestingly, I don't have it prepared. Let's see. Interestingly, you can then send that sheep to sleep, no problem. They've only got 3 hit points after all. Now, sleep only lasts for 2 turns, but if you cast that on the last turn that they're a sheep, that's an extra turn they're out of combat. Depending on the enemy, that could be very useful. Okay, so they shove the sheep awake. And as a sheep, they're just going to walk around, not really doing anything. Oh, damn grovel, right. Shadowheart. Thank you very much. I'm going to stick it at A again. Now, this looks like there are a lot of spells at A, but the thing is, in my head, Banishment, Otiluke's Resilient Sphere, and Polymorph especially, pretty much all have the same purpose, but they do it in slightly different ways, slightly different benefits. These 3 all remove a single character from a fight. In fact, Banishment, if upcast, can remove more. Otiluke's can be used to protect someone instead, and Polymorph changes someone for the longest number of turns, 5 turns. Looking at it like that, to me, it's almost one spell with 3 different variants. Now, I know they are different. Confusion's a bit different because it's an area of effect, but there's not much difference between Banishment, Otiluke's Resilient Sphere, and Polymorph. So it looks like there are a lot up here, but yeah, to me, these 3 are really competing with each other, just they've got slightly different benefits to them. Next up is Stoneskin, which is available to druids, sorcerers, wizards, and war domain clerics. You target a creature, it can be an ally, it doesn't have to be yourself. Upcasting it doesn't do anything. And whoever you cast it on, they take only half damage from all non-magical bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage. So let's cast it on Gale himself. So now he's got stone skin, looks kind of cool. I will say now, or even like showing this off, that if you really want to have that effect, you would usually do better to have a cleric with either an item called the Reviving Hands. They come from a bit later in the game. On Zevlor and the Druid's Grove, it's a pair of gloves called Hellrider's Pride, where when you heal someone, you give the effect of Blade Ward for 2 turns. It isn't until long rest, as Stoneskin is, but so importantly, it doesn't require concentration. And if you're targeting a single person, you just use a level 1 spell slot. Now, I use Mass Healing Word to give it to the whole party. I'm not suggesting you always use that either with an item or level 3 spell slot, but for a level 1 spell slot, you can do the same. Now, no, this isn't on the cleric's spell lists, but it is on Druid. And Druids get healing words. They can do this instead. So if I get into a fight, it doesn't make you resistant to any other type of damage. Nah, this isn't the best use, but it does help reduce the incoming damage. But I would suggest if you really wanted that, just get the Blade Ward cantrip. No, Blade Ward does only last 2 turns. It isn't quite a replacement, but for a level 4 spell slot and concentration, this just does not do it for me. If it wasn't concentration, sure, then it's just a buffed up version of Blade Ward. And that's fine, it's a level 4 spell slot. But I would, for druids, sorcerers, wizards, and clerics, I'd so much rather use my concentration for something else. And lastly, Wall of Fire. This is available to druids, sorcerers, wizards, light domain clerics, fiend warlocks, and bards via the magical secrets. It's a concentration spell that deals 5d8 fire damage to anyone who's inside the area. Upcasting it increases that damage, and it's a bit different to most other spells. There are a few spells like this. You have to draw a template. It does have to be a straight line. I'm just about missing Will here, thankfully. I'm getting all the enemies inside. Dealing I'd say a very good amount of damage. Now 5d8 isn't quite the same as Fireball, let's say. That's just from burning, that's not from moving. Because you do get set on alight, and she takes the 19 damage. That's from burning, that's from walking through the fire. They do get to make a dexterity saving throw, and if they pass, they take half damage. Yeah, probably won't go through the fire. Now what you can do is shove people through the fire. Oh, that should have done damage really. Or throw them into the fire. Be a bit more careful this time. There we are. Took 17 damage. It looks like they're already in the wall of fire. Then on their turn. Oh, it can be used against you. Now, it is an evocation spell. The actual fire damage from the firewall itself is stopped if you take evocation wizard school. But the burning, actual burning, doesn't get stopped because this is a burning surface. I think for evocation wizards, I'd probably put it at A, so your allies aren't also subject to it. But B is fine. It does depend a little bit on the map. As in my previous video, if I was up here and put the wall of fire through here, and enemies have to come through it, that's an easy A tier, maybe even S. You can shove and throw people back behind it, they have to walk through it again. It's amazing. So it's a little bit dependent on partially whether you're an evocation wizard or not, but also on the map where you are. I'm going to leave it at B tier because of the concentration element, and it is kind of damage over time. And honestly, it's usually a bit better to burst someone down rather than do damage over time if you can, because then you stop any action coming from them, they stop hurting you. Anyway, so that's my tier list, and I must say for level 4, it's a little bit disappointing after coming from the level 3 spells. It's kind of such a big high, such a power jump when you get the level 3 spells, and you've got so many good ones. Whereas here, most of the spells are solid enough. They're not bad, but there will be times where I'd probably rather just upcast something like Fireball or Scorching Ray or Hold Person. And I feel a bit bad for clerics only getting 4 in their spell list plus the main spells. So let me know what you think. Have I completely misplaced one of these? If so, let me know why, and perhaps I'll change my mind and give the spell another go. Thank you for watching, making this far, and thank you to all the members of my channel, and hopefully I'll catch you in the next one.